Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Hi, everyone. Today I'm speaking with Julia Samuel. She's one of the UK's leading psychotherapists and also a best-selling author. Her latest book is called Every Family Has a Story. It's really good. Today we talk about grief and what healthy grieving looks like. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, Julia. It is so good to see you. I'm very excited about our conversation.
Me too, Tamara. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your podcast.
So I was just telling you a minute ago that I'm one of these people that I read a lot of magazines and look at stuff online. And whenever I see a book that I find, interesting, a new release or something, I take a screenshot and I go buy it. And then I usually tell my producer for the podcast. And I did that with your new book, Every Family Has a Story. And I just started reading it because I just got it. And here you are. And I want to talk about this book. But before I do that, I want to talk about, some of your other work, especially this book, Grief Works. So maybe that's a good place to start. What is grief? How do we define grief?
So grief is a small word to describe a whole world of often competing, conflicting, messy, chaotic feelings. And the task of grief is to adjust our understanding and recognize the new reality. So, because that is the process of grief, is to adjust to this new reality that we didn't want and we didn't choose. And it could be grief from the death of someone you love, so the death of your mom or your pet, or it could be what I call a living loss, which is the end of a relationship, a divorce, you lose your job, living in a global pandemic. All of that so living losses have exactly the same emotions as grief, but they're often under-recognized and acknowledged. And our brain is a learning machine. So if we allow ourselves to feel the pain of grief, to let the pain run through us, it often hits like a wave and flow through us and get support as we allow it through us, the support of love and connection to others, we incrementally do adjust to this new reality. But it's often the things that we do to block the pain, busyness, anesthetics, drink, and sex, whatever it is, that does us harm over time because we don't adjust. So, and also your emotional bandwidth is limited by what you're using to block the pain. Because if you think of your emotions, you have joy one end and pain the other. So if you block the pain, often it's busyness. Work is a really good, very familiar anesthetic. You also incrementally block your capacity to feel joy because you're as a human being, you can't just block one thing. You just block your capacity to experience. And so you live fine and you function fine and you show up, but you are internally kind of diminished by it. So you don't have this great connection of love and joy, which actually is the thing that enables us to survive death, because what we need most when someone dies is the love and connection to others. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel, and we're done. No, I'm just joking. That was so, yes, that is everything that I have been looking for in a definition of grief, because it feels so complicated.
Yeah,
it feels
it's so competing
different.
Feelings.
Yes.
You can feel sad and furious and resigned and believe it's unfair and you want to make sense of it, and you can't. Often you can't make sense of these feelings. You have to allow them and you have to acknowledge and let them, because emotions are transmitters of information. So you have to let them force your brain to go. Because you wake up in the morning and you kind of think for a moment, I'm okay. And then you go, oh, stab, my mum has died, or whatever it is that's happened. And then you have to kind of allow that. And through time, you do kind of wake up in the morning and you eventually over time know that your mum has died. And that's how the process of adaptation, because grief is naturally adaptive. changes our relationship with the person that's died, because a love for them never dies. It's just knowing that they're not physically present. So it's finding ways of loving, connecting to them since they've died, but also freeing us to kind of recognize that we're not going to see them. And the other kind of side of it is that trauma, so a death from a traumatic event, trauma isn't naturally adaptive. So trauma is like the fire alarm in your brain, the neural networks that are going, ding, 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 ding at 100 miles an hour. And that stops you adapting. So, and growing through the grief. Because people talk about post-traumatic growth, but you have to deal with the trauma first before the grief naturally adapts your relationship with the person that's died or the thing that has happened.
So this is fascinating. When my father-in-law died, my kids were very young and I didn't know what to tell them. So I got some books on grief and little kids and children, and I did as much reading as I could, leading up to he had cancer, and so we knew, and one of the biggest, I can't remember the name of the book. It was the one book that I liked, and it talked about the past, how in the past we lived in big family homes, and, grandma would die and the whole family would, be there for each other and grieve together and love and support each other. And, there were questions, do I bring the kids to the service, the memorial? And I thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't. No, yes, you should, so they can see it and experience and see people cry. And it made me realize that the teachings I had about death when I was a little girl was, you don't ask questions, you don't say anything, people are going to be sad, you're going to be sad, don't make a fuss, and then we'll just move on.
I mean, that to be fair of that generation, and you're younger than me, but also my parents' generation, that was all they had, because there was no information, there was no research. I don't know about your generation, but my parents were products of the Second World War. Their parents had fought in the First World War. So all they could do was forget and move on. Like, what's going to hurt you? Don't talk about what's going to hurt you and just move forward. And what actually we know is that children, for instance, what you don't tell them in your wish and very natural decision to protect them, they experience as a blocking, so that they're excluded. And then they're left to imagine what's happened, because they can tell, the minute something bad happens in a household, everything changes. There are more people in the house, your mum is crying, your father's losing his temper, or the other way around, whatever it is, they can tell. But then they have magical thinking and they make up a story that fits for what's going on. And often that is a story against themselves. Like, I must have done something wrong because I was cross with daddy in my head, or I didn't do my homework. And what they imagine is much worse than the truth. And so what I talk about with families, with young children, even very young children or teenagers, is that the children need the same truth as adults, but in age-appropriate language. So that you can't use the word lost. Children lose things every day, but they find them again. So you have to use the word dead. That your grandfather has died. That means he looks like he's asleep, but he's not asleep. His body doesn't work anymore. And then they are not frightened of death. We are frightened of death because it's been transmitted through the generations. And so part of my kind of hope with Every Family Has a Story was that patterns and behaviors to events in families' lives get passed down from generation to generation until someone is prepared to feel the pain and someone is prepared to change the pattern. So what you did with your kids is you changed the outcome for your children by changing the pattern of what your experience had been. You told them the truth. You trusted and modeled that they could both feel sad and be happy, normal kids. That seeing death doesn't kill them. Death isn't catching. And so that will mean that they won't be as frightened of it as you. And they'll think of it as a natural part of life, which, death is as normal as birth, right? But we kind of treat it as this terrifying thing out there.
Yes. And we're all scared of it, and we don't want it to happen. Yet we know it's inevitable, right? It's inevitable. It will happen.
To all of us. And not only is it
Yes.
going to happen to all of us, but we are all going to be bereaved.
Yes.
And the ignorance is what feeds fear, because again, it just leads you to your imagination. And also, one of the reasons I wrote all 3 of my books was because every client that comes through my door, they think that somehow they're failing, that they're doing it wrong, because they don't know it's normal to feel like you're going mad. They don't know that it's normal that you feel like you've had a layer of skin cut off you and you want to scream at everybody. That grief brings up the version of yourself you really don't like and don't want. They think there's something wrong with them. And so once they understand that actually what they're experiencing is completely normal, that in itself is such a relief.
It's so interesting because I do feel like, especially in North America, that we, we're expected to, or we have this, culture where we need to move on. You need to get over it. You need to your aunt was, she had cancer for years and now she's out of her misery. So I get that you're sad, but this has been going on for too long. It's time to move on. Come on. You can get happy now. So, it's...
And live your best life, right?
Live your best life and have a big
Everyone
smile.
dies for a reason. Exactly. She had a good innings.
And even if you know it's coming, even if you know it's coming, it still isn't easier. And I hear it all the time when people say, "Oh, well, he was sick for so long, so it was expected." But it doesn't feel expected. It feels awful. And is that the difference between the trauma and the grief? Is it I don't know.
So there's kind of 3 things that have gone off in my brain. One is that grief starts at the point of diagnosis. So the moment your father-in-law was told that he had a terminal illness, all of you had anticipatory grief. Because your future of what his expectation of his life was at that point reversed. So you do grieve and you can prepare, and there are things that you can do that can make a difference. So there's a story in every family has a story. Archie, he has a terminal illness. He is going to die. And so our work was how he talked to his 20-year-old children and how to prepare for his own death and how to love his children for their future after he's died, how to love them into their future so that they don't have regrets, so that they have had the opportunity to say everything they need to say, so that they feel as possible, as best prepared as you can. And it's also true that however much you know someone's going to die, or even if a nurse tells you, your mum or dad or whoever it is has only got a few hours left, that moment of death you can never be prepared for. There's something about it that is shocking, devastating, and really overwhelming. But a death that you've had opportunities to speak and reflect and create memories that you can go back and live off for the rest of your life. You've taken photographs, you've been to special places like Archie did with his children. He bought them each presents for their wedding and things for the future that he knew he wouldn't be present at. That is less, I don't think there's a hierarchy in grief, but a sudden out of the blue death, a car crash, a young person dying, a death out of time, that turns the volume up of normal grief. So whatever you would feel with your father-in-law dying is intensified by a sudden and unexpected death.
Yeah, I like how you said there isn't a hierarchy of grief. And we do, you can never explain it's very difficult to explain your own grief to someone else. And this is what you do for a living. People tell you about their grief, or they come to you to work through their grief. And I guess I'm most curious about how you How did you get into grief work, into working with grief? First of all, that's a good question, I think. How?
This is a good question. I mean, I think obviously, like most therapists, you come walking wounded, don't you? You come for your own experiences. And so both of my parents, who are both dead now, they had very significant losses before they even met each other. So my mum, by the time she was 25, was an orphan. Her mother, her father, her sister, and her brother had all died. And all suddenly and traumatically. Her brother was killed in the war. Her mum just keeled over when she was relatively young, and her sister died of an asthma attack. And then my father, his brother, and his father also died traumatically and unexpectedly. So his brother died in a dentist chair, and my grandfather had a heart attack on the Queen Mary, which has always glamorized the death, but I don't think it actually did. But they never talked about any of those people. And so I could never they talked about everything that didn't matter and nothing that was important, like all of that generation. So I could never understand what was going on. So I was always trying to make out what was really happening below the waterline, what they were feeling, because it didn't match what they were saying. And that made me much more, I was curious and I was always listening. I was the youngest of 5 children with 2 sets of twins. So my mum had tons of children very quickly. And I think, unconsciously that drove me to bereavement. But I didn't, even though I was training as a therapist when I was just 30 and volunteering for a bereavement organisation, I didn't add the dots until I was like 45. And I went, maybe there's a link.
Because every family has a story.
Every family has a story. And one of the things in the book also, which I think is useful for your listeners to know, is that every member in the family has a slightly different story. And there can be like competing stories, but also how people express and experience and acknowledge their loss is very different. And so families can really be torn apart by a death when there's this kind of fixed belief that this is one way of doing it and this is the only way, or dad loved me more, or you were the naughty one. And actually a lot of what I did in the book was show that when we can have multiple stories, when we can allow difference, where there isn't a right or a wrong, but there's actually a collective kind of cohesive narrative that the whole family can hold together. Like, isn't it interesting that my sister goes out dancing? Isn't it interesting that my brother kind of cries a lot? Whatever it is, rather than she's selfish and naughty and, and he's the one that's really showing the pain, but actually allowing us all to manage in our own way and come together and name it is incredibly healing.
Yes, it really is. And that's a perspective I hadn't thought about before, because there isn't a rule book on how to do it.
Absolutely. And there can be competitive mourning. So it can be, I think in groups, sometimes there's competitive mourning. Mine is worse than yours, but also in family, there's competitive mourning. I'm losing more. I was closer to dad, so I loved him more. So you don't feel it as much as I do. And we can't measure these things. And it's extremely unhelpful. And so often at a time of crisis, which all of us have at different times, it could be the death of someone, it could be during a pandemic, it could be when someone loses their job, the pre-existing fault lines in a family system are put under pressure and they're more likely to pull apart. And what I wanted to show is that when we recognize that there isn't a perfect family or a particular way of managing life's great difficulties. And life is difficult. There are great moments of joy, but there's a lot of difficult stuff that we have to negotiate. When we can come together and allow both the difficulty of the event and name it and support each other and have fights and repair after the fight. But where we commit to this sort of intentional, like we have goodwill towards each other. I think this thing of there not being enough, scarcity as opposed to abundance, can really tear families apart. And in times of crisis, that scarcity you can really fight over the crumbs, which isn't really what you're fighting about.
It's so true. And I think that there's probably many people listening right now that can relate to that when it comes to, especially a death in the family, right? Where everyone's feeling all the feelings, whatever they may be, and they're very personal and different. And yet, there's this business of divvying up stuff or tying up the loose ends or whatever it might be. And one person's kind of in control of that. And that I think we've all seen it. We've all seen, we've seen families just
fall
absolutely
apart.
disintegrate.
Estrangement over a pot.
Yes. Yes. I've seen it in my own family. I know it does exist, in many years ago when I was a little girl, I saw it. And so I think that has really, also stuck with me. What about grief when someone dies and it's unfinished business? Like it's a daughter and her dad who maybe, had been estranged for, years, and they never got that moment to reconnect
Repair.
or whatever it might be. I think we all have estranged, relationships. And it's like, well, gosh, what if something really bad happens? I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one that thinks about things like this. I don't know.
Oh, but I don't think you are by any means. I think, funny enough, there are a lot of estranged children and their parents, but there are also a lot of estranged siblings. Sibling rivalry gets played out. And the stat is that a third of siblings are completely estranged.
Yeah,
that's
that
a
doesn't
lot.
surprise me. It is a lot. Yeah.
So that's a lot of hurt, and they share so much, and yet somehow they can't find a way of connecting and loving and being committed to each other and giving each other time. But what happens if someone is estranged? I think two things. So one is, while they're alive, it's not like you can get rid of a family member. So you may not speak to them. So Archie was estranged from his mother, who's in my book. But he talked about her all the time because she was his mum and he missed her, but he couldn't manage her complexity and the way she was so narcissistic. And so he had to be estranged from her, but it is not for free. It's not like you can cut and run. Some friendships, you can end a friendship and it's over. You literally never think about them again. But a family member, they're in the body of your body. They're in your key memories are with your family members. So you can never forget them. They're always part of you. And the difficulty is when that person does die, you do both. You grieve the fact that they've died. You grieve the relationship that you did have. And you grieve the relationship you wished you'd had, the one you dreamed of. Because the hope of that, even the tiny hope that I'll get this version of my dad or my mum or my sister that I want, has finally gone. So it's a very complex grieving. And the ones where, I think grief is, people feel very guilty anyway. But when there's estrangement, that guilt can really turn in against yourself. And it can be extremely damaging, actually.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, I have more questions, but before we do that, I just we always like to give back to for our guests being here, and so we ask them to choose a Canadian nonprofit. You're from the UK, so
Yes.
You chose Kids Help Phone, which is amazing. They're a Canadian charitable organization that is volunteer-led, and it's telephone counseling for youth across Canada. And they have been very busy the last 3 years. So very much appreciate you choosing the Kids Help Phone.
I'm so pleased. Isn't it a lovely thing of yours to do? What a lovely...
Well, it's lovely of you to be here and spend your time. So it's, that's how we give back. We help somebody that's important to you. So this is great. When we talk about healing from grief and, and we've talked about how that looks different for everybody. If someone comes to see you and you're working, like, when would somebody go see somebody like you to talk about grief? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, at what point would I know in my life that I need some professional help with working through some grief? What would somebody look for?
I mean, I think people come to me because they're hurting in the present. And it could be because somebody has died. But it could be for many other reasons. And it's through the process of therapy, you kind of recognize and go back and see that there were a lot of earlier injuries. Because one of the difficulties of grief is a new loss will always bring back your previous losses. But also it brings up, I don't know if you know about this, your attachment style, how securely attached you are. And so if you had maladaptive attachment, that of course rears its head because it's our vulnerabilities that come and get us and expose our early injuries when we're grieving. But I think, when people do is when they just feel that, I think often people say to me, I can't bore my friends anymore. I want to get fixed. I'm tired of waking up and feeling like this. I want it to be different. I want it to be over. How long is it going to take? I want you to fix me. And I say it will take longer than you want and that pain is the agent of change. So I'm not going to fix you, but we can work through it. And also you don't get over grief. It's not like something you forget and move on from. It changes you. So what we talk about is that you accommodate it and you need to let it change you. And through that you can adapt and grow through it. But I slightly hate the sort of toxic positivity.
Yes.
That idea that every bad thing is an opportunity to learn, because I think that's so patronizing. Sometimes things really hurt. They're really unfair. And it's just incredibly painful. And you have to find the courage and the love of others to find a way of bearing it, of kind of keeping on going. And that is a really hard thing to do.
It's very difficult. Everything that you say, it forces me to reflect on how many times I've heard, people say, oh, you just need to get over it, or, don't waste your time being sad, or whatever it might be, right? Because we do, I think, as a society, for the most part, like to, box things up and like send them on their way. And if what you're going through makes me feel uncomfortable.
Because emotions are contagious.
Yes.
You transmit them. So it's like, ooh. But I tell you what I'm not saying is I am not saying just get into the mire of your own misery and just stay there and wallow. I am not saying that. I am saying do both. I'm saying it's an oscillation and a movement between allowing yourself to feel the pain, remembering the person that's died, allow the feelings to come through you and change you, and also be restorative. Do things that give you a break from the pain, that are fun, that are with other people, that give you a sense of agency. It could be working, it could be painting your bedroom, it could be going for a walk, it could be swimming. And that you move between the two, and allowing both enables you to bear it. And also, I'm not saying kind of stand up and shout to the world, I'm suffering more than you. What I'm saying is have compassion for yourself. Allow what has happened. Support yourself. Remember the person, or kind of allow this to be significant. But this doesn't have to define you. You don't have to be now the grieving something. That it'll be part of your many identities, and some of them will be happy, joyful, kind of playful identities, and some will be a really sad, bereaved child that feels like an orphan. But they all need their place, and that you don't use one to knock the other out. And I think we're very simplistic now, particularly with social media, that we kind of own one identity, like I'm this broken person. And I don't think that's helpful, because I think for kind of navigating life, we need to allow all of our different aspects to come in and have a voice and play and support the other bits when they need it.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said, grief changes you. And that's okay. And I think that that's the hardest thing to accept, is that because change is hard. And I didn't ask for this grief to change me, somebody might be saying, but it does change us. And that's part of life. And and that allows you to grow into this change and understand it and honor it and feel compassion, like you said.
And over time, that it never diminishes the level of the loss or the intensity of the pain. But over time, that can feel like growth, because when you allow it to change you, your perception of yourself and your humility in the face of your mortality, your perception of what really matters isn't about status or money or how many followers you have. You realize that what really matters is love. And if you look at all of the research around the world, when people look back at their lives, the thing that predicts their happiness, their health, their wealth, their capacity to manage pain is not that they have built a castle or have 10 million followers. It's the love and connection and the quality of the relationships. It's the quality of the relationships defines the quality of their lives. And that includes allowing us to grieve these incredibly important, significant relationships.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Really, truly. Okay, so as we wrap up, every family has a story, how we inherit love and loss. Like I said, I just got it. I've just started it. I love it already. Do you think that we learn from hearing other people's stories?
I really do think the most personal is the most universal. And that everyone that I know that's read the book, that even though the story may be completely different, it could be, so one of the stories is a multi-generation ultra-Orthodox Jewish family where the eldest was a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor, or someone whose dad died from suicide 40 years ago. But actually they see aspects of themselves. And grief and love, so the two are together. Obviously, it's love and loss. And so we inherit ways of loving, which are protective, as well as, we mustn't forget the love side. And you can see and learn how families manage all sorts of things, which I think is inspiring. But also you can see your mum or your grandma. And so I think that, and also you can see how you'd like to be. I mean, why I love writing the book, I'm a grandmother, I've got 9 grandchildren now, is it kind of gave me ideas and ways of being of how I wanted to be as a grandmother, because all my grandparents were dead. So I didn't have a kind of model. And that was really helpful. And then I came up with these 12 touchstones for family about how to support yourself. So that isn't like being a perfect family or ticking the 12 boxes, but it's like, if we're having a tense, difficult time, am I having 5 more positive interactions, or am I just being incredibly critical? Or are there power dynamics going on? Or are we having enough fun? Are we fighting productively? So it kind of gives people a lens into work out what's making us go off, off piste a bit.
I love this conversation, Julia. Thank you so much. Your Grief Works is next on my list. And then, of course, there is This Too Shall Pass.
Which is about living losses. Yeah.
Yes. And then your newest book, as we've been talking about, Every Family Has a Story. You can find Julia on her website, which is juliasamuel.co.uk, or on Instagram, Julia Samuel MBE. Julia, thank you so, so much. Such a great conversation.
Thank you, Tamara. That was a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.